Back to our top story. Emergency crews are searching for survivors amongst the rubble after deadly back-to-back earthquakes in Venezuela. The two hit within seconds of one another yesterday, and they now rank as the most powerful tremors the country has felt in more than a century. More than 188 people are dead, and that number is expected to climb. The first earthquake registered as a 7.2 on the Richter scale, with the second registering as a 7.5. But the two catastrophic tremors in Venezuela weren't the only ones reported Wednesday. A 5.6 magnitude earthquake was reported in Northern California yesterday morning, with reports of some injuries and power outages. It was the strongest earthquake to hit the rural area since 1940. And a 7.2 magnitude quake struck off the coast of Japan, although no serious damage has been reported. Meteorologists there said there was no danger of a tsunami. Well, joining us now is Martin Hudson. He is a geotechnical engineering expert and an adjunct professor of civil and environmental engineering at UCLA. Thank you for being with us. So let's focus on Venezuela. How rare is it to see such powerful earthquakes back to back?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. The location that was hit by these earthquakes is right at a plate boundary between the South American and the Caribbean plates. So it is a place that we expect large earthquakes. And because of the location, we know to prepare for them there. So it is an event that occurs periodically. It doesn't happen every day, but every century or two, you can have these kind of earthquakes. Worldwide, this size earthquake tends to occur about a dozen times. So it's not terribly unusual. What is such a tragedy is when an earthquake like this hits in such a populated area. Then you have loss of life and destruction of property, that's the tragedy. When you have earthquakes of this size that are out in really rural areas, you just don't notice the effects that much. So although it's fairly common worldwide, this one is a bigger tragedy because of proximity to population centers.
So from an engineering standpoint, is there anything that can be done to prepare for this sort of thing? Or conversely, is there anything that they need to be doing in the rebuilding stage, which I know we're still a ways away from?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a question on the minds of everybody who lives in earthquake country worldwide. I'm in California. We think about that all the time. And Venezuela has good building codes. At least they're very good on paper. So the question is, for all of the people who have built without proper inspection, etc., they suffer the bigger consequences. So going forward, if Venezuela enforces building codes more strongly, they have a better building code, and you would expect to see less damage to buildings in the future. So that's probably engineering-wise one of the best things to do.
Well, Martin Hudson, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So much destruction there. Joining us now is seismologist Dr. Lucy Jones, chief scientist at the Dr. Lucy Jones Center. Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Jones. What made these two earthquakes so destructive?
We call them two earthquakes. You could also think of it as one sort of extended earthquake. It sort of all happened together. They're on a very big fault, and when that fault moves that long distance, you produce really strong shaking. That damage you're seeing is in Caracas, and the earthquakes are. So I imagine that there are other towns such as Valencia and that area that would have received much stronger shaking than Caracas has. And I think that it's very likely that the death toll is going to grow way beyond what they have. And it's because we produced really strong shaking for a long time, very near to the buildings.
Wow. And what can we expect in the coming days as far as aftershocks? You talked about, we're going to find more people who have died, but is this area prone to quakes?
Oh, absolutely. This is what we call a plate boundary. There's the Caribbean Ocean plate is moving past South America. So this is big parts of the Earth's crust that move with respect to each other. Same reason that California has a lot of earthquakes. We have the North American plate moving past the Pacific Ocean plate. So this is very, very similar to the San Andreas Fault. Big earthquakes like this every couple of 100 years. And That's a long enough time that people forget and don't necessarily and build appropriately. 200 years ago, we didn't know how to build for better earthquakes. Better buildings to withstand the earthquakes.
And I was actually going to ask just real quick what people can do, because earthquakes, they come really quickly and there's not a lot of preparation. But safeguarding buildings, is that something that can be done to prevent this kind of destruction we're seeing?
Absolutely. We can build buildings that don't come down in earthquakes. We just have to choose to do it. And it isn't actually that much more expensive. People think it must be much, much more. It's more about knowledge and how you go about doing it. But it helps for the future. We also need to remember that changing the building codes doesn't get rid of old bad buildings. You're going to have to, it only goes forward. So retrofitting older buildings takes more money, can be done. It's rare that people find the incentive to get it done.
Dr. Loyce Jones, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it.
So you heard that clock ticking 48 hours so that people can get pulled out and survive. Let's talk now live to Ross Stein, CEO of Temblor, Inc., and also a lecturer at geophysics at Stanford University. Thank you so much. So a double quake. This makes it especially devastating. I would imagine because the first one really shook things up and then the second one finished the business in many areas, no?
Yes, in fact, we had a somewhat similar situation in Turkey in 2023. We had a magnitude 7.8 earthquake, followed 100 kilometers away, 60 miles away, and 9 hours by a magnitude 7.7. So the cities that lied between those two faults got whacked twice. So buildings damaged in the first quake often came down in the second.
And so why so much damage in Venezuela in particular?
Well, two things are controlling the story here. One is that while the epicenter is about 120 miles from Caracas, the rupture propagated toward Caracas and actually got very close to Caracas. And just like a sonic boom, when it's coming at you, you get shaken all at once very, very hard. So that combination of factors led to very strong shaking in Caracas. And in addition, Caracas has many more of the buildings. So we're going to see much more damage there because there is simply a vastly larger collection of buildings.
Well, and we know that 48-hour clock is now ticking to get survivors out from underneath the rubble. I would imagine anybody who's putting their life on the line at this hour, including U.S. helpers who are on the way, has got to be worried about aftershocks and how precarious those buildings and what used to be buildings are to pull people out, no?
It takes incredible courage to go into a collapsed building. And one thing that any of us who live in earthquake country should do is always keep a whistle on us. Because if you get trapped in a building, no one is going to try to dig you out unless they're certain you're alive. And you can only yell for a very limited amount of time. You can blow a whistle, which is easily heard for a very long period of time. So that's $1 safety.
Yeah, but what about aftershocks?
Aftershocks are a menace to the recovery effort. They'll continue not just for days, but decades at decreasing rates of activity. Aftershocks don't get smaller with time, they just get more spaced out with time. So yes, aftershocks cause everybody to relive the trauma, and locally, they can cause a lot of damage.
All right, so as those hours tick on, our thoughts with everybody who is putting their life on the line, people who have lost, and also people who are still trapped. Ross Stein, thank you so much for your expertise. We hope to talk to you again on CBS News 24/7.
Joining us now to discuss more is research geologist Kate Scharer, who's also the U.S. Geological Survey's regional coordinator for Southern California. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's been a very busy 24 hours at USGS. What's the latest information you're getting about what actually happened in Venezuela, and how much risk is there for aftershocks in the hours and days ahead?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. The aftershock forecast has mellowed significantly. We see that the odds of a magnitude 7 or larger in the next week are more like 3 to 5%. So based on the seismicity patterns, that's the latest update we have on the USGS page for the aftershocks. But it's certainly really a tremendous set of earthquakes that came through here.
And Doctor, I know you specialize in how historic or even prehistoric seismic events can inform the study of modern earthquakes. So what is the precedent for what we've seen in Venezuela? I mean, you had these two incredibly powerful back-to-back tremors.
That's right. Often these are called doublets when you have these events in quick succession on faults quite next to each other or even the same fault. There are examples of this. There was a set of magnitude 6s that occurred nearby in western Venezuela in 2025. But a doublet like this is quite interesting for us seismologically to help understand what the terrain of the fault looks like as you underground, basically, what the stress configuration on the fault. But for the people that experience it, it probably was quite like one very long sustained earthquake.
We've also mentioned that there were tremors yesterday off the coast of Japan and in the northern part of California, your home state. Do you? I know it's hard for people to understand, but could there be a link between these events? I don't think that these continents are on, well, I'm trying to think, Venezuela, the United States. I mean, help us understand the plates and what we need to understand about just fault lines across the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans.
You bet. As people often hear, the ring of fire around the Pacific plate is a very active area tectonically. So each one of these earthquakes occurred in different sections on tectonic plates, the meeting of tectonic plates. This one in Venezuela is over exactly where the Caribbean plate is moving to the east towards the Atlantic, so quite separate from the system in California and Japan. We wouldn't expect for these earthquakes to be connected in any way, except that we're on an active tectonic boundary in each one of these settings.
All right, Kate Scharer, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
For more on this, let's bring in Manoochehr Shirzaei. He's a professor of geophysics and environmental security at Virginia Tech. Professor, I mean, these were back-to-back earthquakes that happened overnight. What struck you when you heard of what had happened?
First of all, my thought and prayers goes to people who are affected by that. So, the region is earthquake prone. So we had the history of such events in the past at least 100, 150 years. So I was not surprised to see that. But again, the scale of the devastation and damage is shocking.
So help people understand the concept of aftershocks. I recall in the wake of the 2010 earthquake in Haiti, some of the most frightening moments were those aftershocks because, and the mind plays, the mind is a very powerful thing. When you see the devastation, you see the amount of death in the streets and in the surrounding areas, you immediately, the minute you see it or feel an aftershock, your mind races to that, and so you try to get to safety. I recall one night there was a very big aftershock, and the people that were now living in the town square, they were just screaming because of those aftershocks. Help us understand how unusual it is for two separate earthquakes of this magnitude to occur in less than 60 seconds.
So this is actually not very uncommon. So doublets, we call them. So sometimes the separation is so short that we combine them together as one big earthquake. But sometimes we have the chance to have a few seconds separation between the two. So the smaller one that occurs usually first, we call it as a foreshock, and then the big one that comes later, we call it as main shock. And when we have some massive earthquake, stress fields perturb in the region. Many small faults reactivate or activate or form, and that causes occurrence of many aftershocks. As we noticed actually following this earthquake over the last night, there has been many smaller earthquakes that added to the fear and unfortunately damage and destruction of that event.
I also want to ask you, we saw earthquakes in Japan, California. This makes 4 seismic events over the course of about 24 hours. Is there any correlation between all of this, or is this just completely separate?
So the short answer is no. Because of the distance from this earthquake and also size of this earthquake, we do not expect a direct relationship between those events in California and Japan.
All right, Manoochehr Shirzaei, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We're joined now by Emile Okal. He's a professor emeritus in the Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences at Northwestern University, joining us from Illinois. Good morning, Professor. As we assess the full extent of damage here, just help our viewers understand how rare it is that there are back-to-back earthquakes and within a minute of one another.
Well, this is not terribly unusual in that an earthquake rupture is depends on the presence of asperities on the fault and so on, and therefore it does not always proceed in a smooth, continuous way. And for the rupture to stop for maybe 20 seconds or 30 seconds or so is not in itself particularly unusual. On the other hand, the earthquakes were not separated by enough time to allow for people to evacuate buildings. So this is, in a sense, unfortunate that there was no time for all these people to evacuate between the two earthquakes.
Yeah, no time to evacuate. I understand this also took place on what was a holiday there in Venezuela, so many people were at home. What about the depth of the earthquake? Sometimes that gives us a hint to the scale of the damage. What do you know about that?
Yes, well, the depth is what we call in seismology shadow earthquakes, anywhere from maybe the surface to 30, 40 kilometers down into the earth. And for an earthquake of this size, probably the rupture involved several tens of kilometers or miles into the earth. And of course, the shallower the earthquake, the more damage it can make. Now, what is quite important to realize is that these events took place quite a distance from the capital city of Caracas to the west of Caracas. And incidentally, they took place at about the same location that there were two also very similar earthquakes in 1967, except that they were much smaller. They were probably magnitude 6 or so. But the scenario was kind of similar, and they took place maybe within a few tens of kilometers of the recent ones. They took place inside on land or below the earth, below the land of Venezuela. They did not take place underneath the Caribbean Sea, and therefore the tsunami damage, if there was any, was very minor. It did not reach very large heights of waves, and certainly did not propagate to distance across the oceans.
I appreciate you joining us, giving us a bit of your context. It's just I'm stunned by the footage we still see coming in from Venezuela. But Emile Okal, thanks for being with us this morning.
We're also following rescue efforts in Venezuela after two deadly earthquakes. Right now, nearly 200 people are dead and 1,500 others are injured. At least 150 people are still missing. That's according to the president of the Venezuelan National Assembly. And you can see entire buildings here. They were reduced to rubble. Now, the earthquakes hit last night. Video here captured the moment the ceiling at an international airport near Caracas came down. It sent travelers running to escape the destruction. Another video shows a man on a stretcher giving a thumbs up after he was rescued from the rubble of a collapsed building. People in the area cheered the successful rescue. Glad to see that. The U.S. State Department announced today that it would mobilize logistical resources, search and rescue groups, and dispatch a disaster assistance response team to Venezuela. It'll also give the country $150 million in aid. Let's bring in Loyce Pace, Regional Director for the Americas at the IFRC. Loyce, thank you so much for your time today. How is your organization helping the Venezuelan people during this very difficult time?
Well, thank you, Mugo, for reporting on this. Our organization has been literally up all night, ensuring that we understand the situation on the ground. Obviously, it's devastating. In the first few minutes or hours, it was unclear how exactly we could understand the situation and support the Venezuelan people, the Venezuelan Red Cross with our services. But since we've been able to be a part of those search and rescue efforts that you were showing and work side by side with the Venezuelan authorities facilities to identify people to provide them with health care given their injuries, both physical and mental, frankly. And otherwise, we're looking at healthcare facilities, how we can improve those, especially given there are a number that have been offline, and otherwise just provide supplies like food and hygiene kits and the like to people who have been affected.
And what kind of challenges are you facing right now? I'm sure there's just so much going on.
Yes, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, it's really hard to ask people to face yet another night outside their homes. I mean, imagine you see people running out of these buildings. Many of these buildings are high rises. They're apartment buildings. There's quite a lot of density in the greater Caracas area. And so people have been unhoused. They've been displaced, and the government is working towards opening and making shelters available. We are also bringing in those types of kits and facilities like tents and the like. But that's number one, making sure people feel safe and know what to do. They can't re-enter these structures that are compromised, and yet where do they go? I think otherwise, aside from that information and education, it's finding a way to access these communities. I spoke with the Red Cross president of Venezuela just before hopping on, and he was talking about how even though they have thousands of volunteers all over the country, it's still very hard to get committed volunteers to Caracas. It's still difficult to move around. We have found that as well with our data gathering teams. They spent all night in places like Guaira and elsewhere just understanding the damage, but it took hours for them to do that and to do it safely. They're still experiencing aftershocks, don't forget.
Of course, of course. And for those who are watching right now thinking, I want to do something, what would you say to them? How can people help out?
You know, there are a number of appeals that are being launched, including by the Venezuelan Red Cross. We will be launching our own appeal shortly at the International Federation of Red Cross, and that's where a number of national societies, we call them, are involved, whether it's Red Cross societies from the Americas, from Europe, or from elsewhere. And so I think those campaigns are really helpful. A lot of people don't realize how helpful and productive it is to just send money, because then that allows us to buy the products, to staff the people and the programs, and to ensure we're really making progress in this very long effort that we're facing.
And so many people still missing right now. So our thanks to the first responders out there, including you, Loyce Pace. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.